Okay, I think we're ready to go, as far as I can tell. All right, last time we did a little bit of mesh mixer things. We tried to put the head onto the body of some AI generated models, and that worked pretty well. We got to the very end and mesh mixer didn't like the Boolean operation, but let me show you. I forgot to open up mesh mixer. Let me show you a way that it does work, at least for that part of it. If I saved it, I don't know if I actually saved it. Let's see. Open. Where did we save? I think right here. Let's see if it'll open up, and we will look at it. Yeah, it did. All right. Here. So it's a different color because it's in a different group, but what I ended up doing, and now I mean I can do that because it's all one model, but let's import to some other model. Append. That's append. Oh no, it doesn't matter. Oh, okay, yes. All right, so here we've got our two models. These make no sense together really, but this is just so I can have it trigger the right command. So, you know, this spawn is going to have a wing on the back like this. So maybe that's what we want, you know, something like that. And we need them to stick together. So you can do the same idea that we were doing. Select both of them in your object browser, just hold down shift and select them. And the combine option here, it just kind of automatically happens. It's not as good as the Boolean union because it doesn't really take into account the inner geometries or anything. It just sticks them together, but it will work. So if you can't get the Boolean union to work because for whatever reason, then the combine will just, whatever you have selected in your object browser, it will just make them one thing. Now it does put them in different groups, so they come out different colors, but if you look in your object browser, there's only one object in your object browser. You know, the whole thing is one piece, and you can export it as one piece and take it to the next step. Now there were other steps we were going to do that we didn't get to. We were going to add a fourth finger, like a pinky finger here, because it only has 3 fingers and a thumb. And we were going to do maybe some adjusting to his feet, maybe, you know, because they're not level. You know, they're one of them's off the ground, so that would be easy enough to just go in there and do your sculpting and move. So the move brush, where's it at? There it is. With a large enough sphere of influence, and you could just move his foot down until it matches where you want the other one to be. You could even go so far as, oh, we missed the toes. Let's see, let's try to get more like that. You know, get them somewhere in the vicinity of where you think they are more or less it's also very laggy. So you have to be careful with that when you have these larger models. And then you could plane cut, edit, plane cut, and just chop off the bottom. This is probably going to be really laggy. I may not can actually get it lined up, but you would drop this plane down to where it chops off the bottoms of his feet evenly. And then, like, I'm still not quite there on moving this left leg down. So plane cut, and then you would, oh, I oriented it towards half and half. You know, do all that kind of stuff. We're going to cancel that. Then you're left with, okay, to print him, I've got some really thin features here, so you might want to do some thickening to the cape. Maybe in your slicer you tell it to print thin walls, so it kind of makes the thin stuff thicker, so it can actually print it. Because most of this cape isn't going to print. I think I did bring it into Cura, maybe not in the stream, and tried to slice it, and it did slice, but there was a whole bunch of this cape that was just not printable. I did not turn on print thin walls in that case. So there's some little things you can do. Let's say that you're getting printed and now you want to finish, you want to paint it or whatever. That's what we're going to talk about today, is all of those types of things. Oh, I did put this self-promotion. If you're interested, this is a review paper that several of the grad students and I and some of the faculty wrote. This particular one, they just published it maybe a week ago or something, and it is talking. It's going over the field of in situ monitoring. So while the print is happening, monitoring different parts of that print. Most of these are maybe a vibration or a pressure somewhere, or I think there are some that do video monitoring. But it's a review paper of the past, I don't know, things within the last 10 years, mostly probably the last 5 years, including some of our own work on monitoring prints as they happen to determine if there, or predict if there is going to be a fault, or maybe you need to do some maintenance on your machine. Some printers are doing this kind of thing now. Some of the Bamboo Lab printers, they do a little bit of this. Like they'll print the first layer and then they'll basically more or less take a picture of it and process that picture and see, is there first layer defects, like did it not stick down well, or did it look too stringy or something like that, and if it detects that there's a problem, then it'll actually send you a message on your app or your phone or however you have yourself connected to the printer, and pause the print and wait for you to do something, tell it it's okay, or go restart the print or something. This is a paper that goes over that field, because most printers don't have a lot of information about what's happening. Basically, they know if the temperature seems right, and some of them have filament runout detectors, so they know if the filament has run out. They don't necessarily mostly know that filament's actually being fed into the printer. There are a few that have filament, like not extrusion detectors, but the fact that the filament is moving. So there are a couple that have that kind of sensor, but most of them, they just basically have some thermistor data for temperatures, and that's about it. Everything else is they're just assuming it's fine. And these papers in this link here are, I guess it's a little bit off the page there. Let me see if I can, there we go. I think there was Additive, might have been off the page. You probably could have figured that out. So most of the experimental work is a combination of a variety of techniques. Particularly what we were doing is trying to make it local so that you didn't have to send information to the cloud and have it processed remotely, because some of the visual, some of the AI detection that uses a camera, it's not so easy to process locally, and so it has to send it off somewhere to process it and then tell it, later on after it's processed the information, was it good or not. So the processing wasn't locally, but there's a variety. So if that's something you're interested in, this is a new paper that kind of covers the field currently of real-time fault detection is basically what this is, and particularly for FDM printing, so extrusion based. So that's a little bit different also. There are a little bit more of these in some of the SLA type, the resin print, and some of the metal printing. So this is particular to extrusion base. All right. So I've got piles of stuff all around me here that I've just went and gathered on. These are some of the things that I use for finishing a part. Like you want to paint it, or you want to seal it, or whatever you're trying to do. I got a variety of things over here. Some of these are things not to do, because there are some stuff that just doesn't work too well on the plastics that are in 3D prints. And then most of these are stuff that will work okay and some work better. So I think oh wait, before I get too far, let me make the announcement about the competition. So the 13th, the plan is, if you are competing in person, we will meet at IESB at noon and compete in the, assuming the weather is fine, which right now it seems like it's going to be okay. We'll meet in the grassy area there and do our catapult contest. The rules of that are on the Canvas page. If you can't make it, that's fine. You can send in videos and still compete, enter the contest. The difference is if you're in person, then I do have some prizes from things that we use throughout the quarter that you can win or acquire. So if you're interested in that, you don't have to do this contest at all. You can do any contest out there, and that can count as far as credit goes. But if you're interested in that, it will, assuming things hold out fine, then the 13th at noon is what we'll do. All right. Now we'll talk with our stuff I've got over here. All right. So I think we'll start with gluing. So we've kind of already done that a little bit in the past, but I just wanted to make sure that all of this is in one video. So usually, not all the time, but a lot of times, you have to glue your stuff together or fix it together somehow. There's a whole nother, I think what we'll do maybe Friday or Monday, when we talk about the strengthening parts through annealing and all that. There's other ways to strengthen parts too. We'll talk about fasteners and how you can use actual fasteners to hold parts together. But so that's going to be a different topic. But here, glues, epoxies, glues, all that kind of stuff. So I've got a sample. Let's get down to the. Oh, it looks like the camera just doesn't like to stay running today. I don't know why it's doing that. So if I notice it, I'll restart it. There's one. Let's see. There's one. Let's get this out of the way. What else do we have for potential glue candidates? This. Oh, things are falling. And I think there's one more over here somewhere. Well, kind of. There's this one. Here it is. All right. All right. So these are things you might gather up and say, oh, I'll glue the parts together with these. I'll just go ahead and start out with the one I used almost all the time, is this combination. So I use the thicker gel super glue. I don't know that it matters that it's the Gorilla brand, but that's the one that I use most. Sometimes you'll go to Harbor Freight and they'll have these little guys on sale for like 50 cents for a pack of 5 or something. I think I got this from Dollar Tree. This is also super glue, cyanoacrylate. The reason I might like these sometimes is that they're kind of one-shot uses. They've got a super tiny amount. It says 0.5 gram, and that's probably including the case itself. Super tiny amount of super glue, so you don't really have to worry about wasting a bunch. You basically use this and then throw the whole thing away. And they usually come with the little applicators, So I do pick these up and use them occasionally. But most of the time, I'm using this and this. So what these are, I like the gel super glue because the really thin super glue with FDM prints, it tends to like seep into the grooves, the layer lines and things, and you might not actually get it to bond to anything. So I like the gel so it doesn't do that. And I like the activator. Let's see, this one's actually called accelerator. So there are a variety of these. This thing, what you normally do is you put little dots, around maybe a 1/2 inch or 1 inch apart from each other, depending on how big the thing you're gluing is. And then the other part, you spray this stuff on, and it will set almost automatically or instantly. In fact, this is called InstaSet. With super glue. And so the downside to that really quick setting is that in general, with any kind of adhesives or whatever, the faster they set, the more brittle the joint is. And so the downside is that it is a brittle connection. Sometimes that's good because you kind of want to temporarily hold something in place while you're doing whatever. And then break it loose later, and so that's actually a benefit. but and generally the faster setting doesn't expand. So the slower stuff, you have to make sure you're clamping down, and your joint doesn't move around, or the adhesive itself doesn't expand and open up the joint. So this is what I use most of the time. This combination, almost all the time. But you might also have model kits. So like the little, here's one, like this. This is a very dusty box, but here's one. So, these things. You might have these, and they have, you go down the aisle in Hobby Lobby, and there's all kinds of glues there. Most all of those glues, except for the super glues, won't work, will not work. So this stuff, this is really good for those kits. This also, really good for, or good, I don't know if I call it really good for those kits. But the way most of these work is that they actually are interacting with the plastic itself. And that plastic on almost all of those kits is styrene, and you don't print with styrene. That would be actually kind of dangerous, because styrene, when it melts, I think it releases maybe a chlorine, maybe. So I'd have to look that up, but I think it's, something, a chlorine gas or something like that, that you would not want. Maybe it's chloroform, I don't remember. But it's not something you would want to have in a printer. So these are really good for styrene based models, but you don't print with styrene. So don't go get this kind of stuff or grab it out of your other hobbies and think it's going to work, because it's pretty much not going to work at all with FDM printed stuff. So don't get these, or at least get them for your models, but don't think that they're going to glue your plastic stuff together that you printed. These two are different kinds that you also see. You'll hear the E6000 is like the super strong or whatever, and that's true. It's just a slower drying, and the Gorilla, well, actually this is Gorilla brand, but the Gorilla glue, also really good. And in fact, it says bonds, well, let's see, what does it say? Bonds virtually everything. So that sounds like that'll work. And these will work. The problem with these is that you have to be willing to wait. So you clamp it down. These slower drying things and the matching, like I didn't bring over any of the 2-part epoxy type of stuff. Those all will work. You just have to clamp them down, particularly this Gorilla Glue, because it's a foaming type of glue, and it will push the joint apart if you don't clamp it together, and it won't really hold much if you don't clamp it. So if you want to use these, they're really good, very strong connections, but they're slower to bond, like to cure and set up. I don't even know what the time frame on this is. I'm sure if I read this tiny little print, it would tell me, but I'm going to guess it is going to be in the 15-minute or more range. Oh, 1 to 2 hours. I think that is clamp them for 1 to 2 hours. So, read the fine print on these other types of glues, because, in fact, this one, the 3 little, you can't see that. I can't see that. The 3 little things are, so this one is water activated, so you dampen it, and then you glue it, and then clamp it. And it's even got the clamp it in red. If you don't do that, it's going to foam and expand and not going to hold your stuff together. So these are okay, but you do have to be prepared that you're going to hold these things together for a long time, hours even. And I have a whole set of clamps that you can, for that kind of purpose. The other side of that time to dry, really fast stuff, setting stuff is brittle. Really slow setting stuff is really tough. Like, it is really tough of a joint once you're done with it. And a lot of times the material will fail before the adhesive fails on those longer cure time adhesives. So that's some of the adhesives. There are plenty of other kinds of adhesives too, including I guess they're not adhesives, but ways to fasten things, mechanical fasteners and snaps and all that kind of stuff. We'll cover that in the time when we talk about the heat treating stuff. So let's say that you've got, or maybe you didn't need to glue stuff together, but you've got your stuff ready to do some painting. So I brought out a couple, let's see, I found this guy that I printed, I don't know how long ago, some body for some sort of mech. I don't know. I don't even remember what it is, but I found pieces to it. And so you've got that far. This one's really dusty, so it's probably not a great idea to try printing something that's really dusty. So you clean this thing off. If you are cleaning, or maybe you want to sand it and you want to do some wet sanding, that's okay. Just be sure that you do all of that and then wait a very long time, because water will actually get into your FDM prints. They're not mostly watertight. Water can absorb into them, infiltrate into them. And if you trap water inside there and then paint over the top of it, at some point that water is going to try and get out, and you'll end up with, you know, cracks in your paint, or it'll just slough off or whatever. So if you do any kind of water cleaning or water sanding or anything like that, give plenty of time for it to dry before you try to do any kind of coating on top of that. Obviously, you can't really accelerate the drying by heating it, because these plastics, they print at 200 degrees Celsius, but they actually start deforming at maybe 60 to, depending on the plastic, 60 to 100 degrees Celsius. With PLA, which is what you're mostly printing, deforming when you're at 65-ish degrees Celsius. So you can't really like take a heat gun to it and accelerate it drying, because it will soften it up to the point that it's deformable. There are some prints, a couple that I know of, that take advantage of that. There's a hairy lion. Let's see if I can find that. Let's see. Here he is. So this is him printing. All of that's his hair. And so they're printing it in straight little rows or across the top of his head. And then you have to take this outer support off that was holding the hairs in place. And then you actually take the idea that, I mean, it doesn't look good at all, right? But you take the idea that this stuff does deform with heat, and you, in this case, they're just using a hair dryer, and you basically groom his mane, you know, and deform all of the hair on purpose. So there are some that actually go in there and they intentionally take advantage of the fact that most PLAs and stuff you print don't melt, but they get past their glass transition temperature at only maybe 60 to 65 degrees Celsius for PLA, and you can use that to your advantage. That also works if you're finishing a part and it's kind of stringy. So I usually have one of these little guys around, or I have a heat gun. A hair dryer can do this, but a lot of times the hair dryer doesn't get quite hot enough. This is a little butane or propane torch. I don't remember which one it is now, but it's a little torch, and you can go over any stringy areas like really light, passing over it with a heat source, either a heat gun or one of these little torches, and a lot of those strings will just they don't disappear, they suck up into the print, so they shrivel up. So if you don't want to go through and try to cut off all of the strings, then a heat gun or something like this can eliminate a lot of the strings. This, the ones that are actually torches, can also not melt together the outer layers, but sort of smooth the layers a little bit, the outer surface layers. You know, you can't sit there and like try to work on one spot, because it will just melt the part with there's nothing left. But if you pass over it, not only will it get the strings off of there, but it will sort of melt the outer layers a little bit. There's another process that you might have seen. I don't have anything to show you for this one, but called smoothing, vapor smoothing. There are certain chemicals that will, different materials, PLA is not really one of them, but different materials are sensitive to, and they melt, they dissolve in. And so the most popular one is ABS, which you probably don't print a lot of, and acetone, which you might have some acetone. It's highly flammable, so you have to be careful with this. But you can vapor smooth some materials, and let me see if I can. If you do it well, the results are really good. See if I can find a set of images that kind of show it off. Here's a let's see. Here's an owl. Look at an owl. So here, oh, it's off the screen. Let's come back. Here you've got a freshly printed owl in ABS. So this is ABS material. And over here, same, well, not the same one, but a sister, I guess, to this owl that has been vapor smooth. And so you can obviously tell the difference. And there's several others scattered around. Here's a bracket that's been vapor smooth. Here's a hexagon and a cylinder, several other things over here. There's a Charmander or whichever one that is. So the good side is that this obviously creates a very smooth surface. The downside is you lose a little bit of detail. It only works with ABS and acetone. In this case, these are ABS and acetone is very flammable. And I guess the other thing is if you do it too long, it will dissolve completely. So like there will be nothing left. It will if you put a ABS printed part in acetone, it will eat it completely, and it'll just be a slurry. So there are some downsides to that. So there are similar chemicals for other materials, but most of those chemicals are not ones you're going to just, for one, be easily able to get, and you don't want to deal with outside of like a hood type of setting, because they're not nice to deal with. There is one other material specially made by Polysmooth, or what is their name? Well, the material is called Polysmooth. Polymaker is the brand, and Polysmooth is the particular model. So this is a filament that you print like PLA, and it is specially designed to interact with isopropyl alcohol. So instead of having to use acetone or something like that, you get similar results. I don't know that they're quite the level that I've seen for the ABS smoothing, but there's some big advantages here. For one, you don't have to try and print ABS. This stuff prints a lot more like PLA, and you don't have to deal with acetone, which is pretty flammable, particularly when you the vapor form of it, which is what you usually use for the smoothing. So this, if you want to explore some of that, this is maybe a way to do it. There is a machine here, Polysure, and it's not super cheap. So there is a machine that will do this with the Polymaker Polysmooth material. You can do it on your own with just kind of paintbrush and all that, or another way you can do this is let's see if I can find on Amazon the headlight restoration kit. Let's see if I can find the right kind. This kind right here. So this kind of restoration kit is a heated cup and a little spout that basically creates vapor from I think in this case I don't know what the vapor if they're using a acetone as the vapor in this, or what exactly there is, but this little type of setup can slightly safer, I guess, produce vapor from chemicals, but I don't know. In general, I don't do much of the vapor smoothing, because you do have to create a vapor of something that's generally kind of flammable, and so you have to be very controlled environment to deal with those. They do exist, and they do create smoother surfaces. I would say if you needed that and you didn't want to invest in all the the polisher where it's in a chamber and it does its, it kind of controls it, you didn't want to invest in all that, the next best thing without just a bunch of sanding is this. So let's go to our camera. This stuff. Let's see, which way did I set up? That way. So this is a let's see, I don't remember who. Smooth On is the company that makes this. You can get it off of Amazon, I'm sure. Before I get too far, let's actually say that that's true. XTC 3D. Oh, it's not typing. Yes, you can still get it. It's not cheap, but the little kit, the same kit that I've got here, $35. Actually, oh well, that one's with 7. Oh wait, why is this one so much cheaper? Oh, it's much smaller. So if you want to experiment, 6.4 ounces versus 24 ounces. Apparently, the one that I'm showing you here is the 24 ounce version. So if you just want to experiment or do one little thing, then there is a cheaper, half price, but it's not even half. It's a quarter of the volume of material, but it's half the price. So anyway, what this stuff is it's actually a 2-part. There's 2 bottles in here, 2-part epoxy that will, they're painting it on your print, and it self-levels, and it basically just coats the entire thing. So it, instead of kind of the smoothing way that the acetone vapor or any of those do, where they kind of melt everything together, this one puts a layer on top of your print. So it will increase the volume, the size of it a little bit, but it self-levels, and it does a good job of, if like tolerancing and things like that don't matter and super fine details don't matter, then this is a decent alternative to the vapor smoothing type of thing. Probably cost a little bit more unless you are considering like doing the polisher, which was $280 for the machine, and then the material was like $35 a kilogram. This works over any material. It doesn't even have to be 3D printed. It's just anything. It will go on top of, coat it, self-level, and then the coating itself is an epoxy, so that's super easy to sand. Now, it is an epoxy and like a resin, so you do want to wear some kind of respirator if you're sanding that stuff, because you don't want to breathe that those dust particles. But that's probably easier way. It's messy because you're mixing up these things and you're pouring them or painting them on your print, and it's going to drip off of it. So it is a messier process. You definitely want the throwaway gloves. I usually do this on like just a piece of aluminum foil, so I can throw that away when it's done. But this is a way to get super smooth surfaces. You lose some detail because it is adding thickness. But if you're on a larger print, a helmet or something like that, then it's a pretty easy way to just coat the whole thing and smooth it out. And it does a pretty good job. I don't know if I have any examples right now that I could show of stuff I've done this to, but it does a good job of hiding layer lines and making it all smooth. So that would be another way. Let's see. Obviously, you've got, for smoothing, you've got all sorts of, there's all sorts of little file kits. This is one single file. There's all sorts of sandpapers. I will say on the sandpaper, check the back of it. and there's a couple of pieces of information you're looking for. One is the number. So the number, the lower that number is, the rougher the sandpaper is. So this is 100 grit sandpaper. That's pretty low. That means that it is pretty rough. This texture is pretty rough. There are lower, like 38 and 16 and all that. Normally you're not using those. 100 grit is as low as I would go on a 3D print, but it goes much higher. Where might there be some? Oh, here we go. These are kind of handy. Little nail file sanding sticks. If you are trying to get super smooth finishes, you can go down like the model kit aisle in Hobby Lobby or something, and they have these little sanding sponges. Like that one, I think that says it's 3,200 grit, 3,200 grit, and the roughest of these is, well, there's a 3,600. The roughest of, there's a 12,000, is like 2,000 grit or whatever. So those are more for like polishing, like you've gotten it really smooth and you're trying to get it mirror shiny, that kind of stuff. A lot of times I'm sanding with 100 grit or 220 grit. I start with, if it's really rough print, might start with 100 grit. Actually, I'll probably start with some kind of little file, and then maybe some 100 grit. You can see I've just kind of cut out little pieces, torn off pieces over here, because you're usually printing really small things. And maybe a sanding stick. They make actual sanding sticks for, like, also in the model kit sections of a hobby store. Generally those are more expensive than if you just go to Walmart or wherever and go to the nail care section, and there's usually some of these that are actually pretty cheap. So the other thing I was going to say is that some of these, particularly the paperback kind, will also say wet sand on them, and it doesn't mean you have to wet sand. It just means you can wet sand. If it does not say wet sand on there, there's a really good chance that if you try to, like, wet sanding is generally kind of good if you're sanding something that's constantly clogging up your sandpaper, like it's always getting clogged up with the dust of whatever you're sanding. Then wet sanding will kind of help that not happen as often. The downside we already talked about. The water can get into the print and you have to let it dry. The other downside is if you use a sheet of paper, sandpaper, that is not made for wet sanding, the grit, the binder that holds the grit on there, is water soluble, and all your grit comes off your paper and you're just left with paper. So if you are doing wet sanding, make sure the sandpaper you're using actually is wet sandpaper. And they come in the same grits in general. And the back will say wet sand, or this one does not. This is actually for drywall, which you would not wet sand. And so if it doesn't say the words wet sand on the sheet somewhere, then it is almost for certain going to fall apart if you tried to wet sand with it. All right, what else do I have for sanding? Oh, it's very tempting to do sanding with, one of these little types of tools. This one is just some, I don't even know if this is Harbor Freight maybe, or cheap Amazon, I don't remember. But it's fine. This one, this is battery powered. It charges USB-C. This one is actually better because it's so weak. So the real Dremels and the real tools that are high speed, if it's not adjustable to go to a lower speed, then it's probably just going to melt the plastic surface. So if you have something like this, electric tool to sand with some of the bigger areas, then just be careful that you're not going very high speed, because the friction will just melt the plastic. So the cheap stuff in this case, assuming it actually runs, then usually it's lower speed. This one actually is adjustable. I think it's got 5 levels of speed, and that's actually going to be better for the 3D print sanding, because it's all plastic, and if you sand too fast, the friction will just melt the plastic. So I usually have one of these. They make another kind They make two other kinds. One that's like an ultrasonic cutter. I have not used any of those. I've seen lots of, you know, Facebook ads or whatever for the ultrasonic cutter, and they show it cutting off support material and stuff like that. Haven't ever used one of those. They make a kind of reciprocating, it looks like an electric toothbrush. And I think, I've not used either of those other two, but I think the electric toothbrush looking one is probably a better setup. Because it's probably not going to melt the plastic as often as something like this will. But I do have these, and I use them kind of occasionally, but not often. Usually if I'm sanding, I'm doing it by hand. Obviously you have these guys that come with the printer. One thing with these, and I should find it. Hold on a second. These are good for removing some material, but you do have to be careful because they have very thin points, very sharp, and it is not at all uncommon for this to happen. So, yeah, you can, there we go. You can see one of those has broken the tip off. It's not so bad that, you know, the tip broke, because you usually get these for free in your printer kit or whatever. The bad thing is that tip went somewhere, and it's like a tensile failure, and these are hardened, and so it's kind of brittle failure, and it flies, it goes somewhere, and it hits stuff. So it could be your eye that it hits or whatever. So be careful using these to cut anything that's any large kind of cut. If you are using these to cut maybe a support off or something like that, try to get down into the jaws, not at the tip like this one, because those tips are hardened and thin, and they will snap off of there and go flying somewhere. So and these are kind of bad for that. You know, for one, you're getting these for free, so they may not be super high quality metals. So be careful with those if you're using them for removing particular supports, because that's usually what you go and grab when you're using support or trying to get some support material off of there. Do I have any other of that side of things? I think everything else here is on the painting side. All right, so you've gotten your model cleaned up, you've sanded on it, and now you're ready to paint. You can go straight to painting, but typically these the FDM prints like this guy or whatever are not going to take paint very well directly on the plastic. It can, and do I do that? Sometimes I do that. Usually when I'm doing that, it's a big thing. Like I did these tree stumps for a play, and they were like the size of tree stumps, and they were a bunch of big pieces, and I printed them and glued them together with the with the stuff I showed you. Actually, this exact bottle, glued them together, and they work fine. And they're big, and they're stage props, so nobody's going to be within like 30 feet of them in the audience, so you don't have to be too worried about what they look like. So those I just put paint straight on top of, and it was fine. But something more like a thing that you're going to be close to, these probably need some more surface preparation. So you might have gotten you've found any kind of little baubles. This is actually a two-part thing, so maybe you've got this seam right here, and you want to fill in that seam. This kind of stuff is fine. I usually go anytime some of this stuff's on clearance, I usually grab some of it. This stuff is more expensive for the amount that you get than if you were to go to maybe Walmart or AutoZone or any of the car stores where the automotive repair type places, and get some of the red putty from Bondo. Let me see if I can find you a picture of that. I can't find mine, so I have to find you a picture. It's usually called spot glaze or something like that. Let's see if I can find a good picture. Well, I can't find a great one, but this stuff doesn't have to be from Bondo. Here's one that's just called red glazing putty. That's a pound, so that's probably way more than you ever need. Um, so 5 ounces for $12. This actually, now in this case, this was way cheaper because I got it on sale for $2. There's not as much here. This is 0.625 ounces, so it's not nearly as much. But usually you're not doing that much with it. So these putties, the good thing about them is that they don't have to be mixed with anything. You just squeeze it out, get some kind of little applicator, which, you know, the official ones are things like this. But since you can 3D print stuff, you could print an applicator, or you could just use a credit card or whatever to spread the stuff on there, and they dry on their own. So the red glazing putty, these kind of putties, they dry on their own in various amounts of time, but at least most of them are dry in 30 minutes. Some of them are dry way faster than that. And these are good for filling in seams or gaps or something, you know, your printer missed a spot somehow, you know, it didn't extrude right, so you've got a hole in your model. These are okay for that. The actual Bondo, so like the you know, the can of Bondo, the difference here is underneath this cap, you can actually kind of see it there. There's a hardener, and it's in a little tube. So this one is for bigger stuff. So maybe you're making really large pieces that you need to smooth out. Then you scoop out some of the putty, you mix in a little piece of the hardener, so you have to mix it together. Depending on the ratio of how much hardener you put to the putty, it'll dry faster or maybe never at all if you don't put enough, or if you don't get it mixed very well. So it's a little bit harder to use this stuff. And it's rarely useful in 3D printing because you're usually not printing something the size of a car. You're printing something the size of this little, whoops, not me, this little guy, and you just need a little tiny bit. And so I would usually use this kind of stuff for filling in gaps, things like that. If this gap is really big, you know, and the downside to putting this putty in that gap is that this putty is not the same material as this plastic, and over time they will want to move. You know, maybe they get hot or humid or whatever, and they want to expand at different rates. And so if you have a large amount of this kind of putty in a gap somewhere, maybe you want to fill in this whole socket, then that different amounts of expansion are going to cause it to crack or even pop out of there. So if you have a big thing you need to fill in, the best thing to do there is, let's see, where did I put it? Here. Something like one of these little guys. So these doesn't have to be this brand or anything. There are a variety of these brands. This is a 3D printing pin. You literally feed filament into one end. It has a little drive motor and heater here, and it extrudes molten filament out the other end. And it's a pin, so you're in there filling in whatever you want with the same material. So it can be the exact same filament. You just clip off some of the roll of blue filament that you used, feed it into the pin, and you can fill in mistakes. Or you can use it as kind of like a welding thing and weld two parts together if you wanted to. But these are not super expensive. Let's look at what they're ranging. Here we have, this is one of the bigger brands, this Scribed, or Scrib 3D, or whatever it is. I assume it's supposed to be Scribed. One of the bigger brands. You can actually get these at Hobby Lobby. I've seen those. Oh, we got a hello from Da Vinci 10. 3 Doodler is the original one. Actually, oh, I forgot about this. So I'll have to dig this thing out and show you sometime. Maybe we have time. Not today, but this one actually prints sugar. So it prints edible candy. It's kind of hard to use, but it does work. But I don't even know where I put this thing. But I bought it last December. Um, you know, $40 or so. These are pretty handy. I think I would probably spend a little bit more and get the scribed version. Although I got one from Tech Boss. I don't know where I got it from. Um, but they do have like little packs of filament specially kind of formulated for these, but any filament works. I just run the exact filament that I printed the part with, and it works fine. Maybe it doesn't flow quite as smoothly as some of the little filament sticks that they make for it, but these will usually print anything that you can print up to ABS. Beyond that, some of the really high temp stuff these can't do, but they work fine with any of the PLA, PETG, ABS kind of materials. So this might be a little, if you find yourself putting together often pieces of prints, then this is probably a decent investment. If you'd go with the scribed ones, look like they're in the $60 range, but you can get the cheaper ones, the $30 range ones, and they will work just as well. They just, I don't know, maybe they have slightly not as good components in them. I don't know. I've never had one of these break. I've got 3 of them for a variety. I have in different places. So, but I've never had one break or anything. The biggest danger is you are holding it like a pen, and that nozzle is going to be printing temperature hot. So you do have to make sure that you're not, burning yourself. All right, so that is another good filler type of tool if the putty's not going to work for you. So you get all your big gaps filled in. I usually spray a primer on there, and I use one of 2 primers. I either use, most of the time I use this stuff, one of these Mr. Surfacer things. This is a high build primer, and I think there's different numbers like 1,000, 2,000, or whatever. The higher build of these are really good for filling in layer lines. You might lose some fine details, but if it's a bigger model, maybe like this size model or bigger, then something like this will fill in a lot of those layer lines pretty easily. If it's a smaller model or maybe a resin model, then I might use something like this kind, and it's just got a finer particle size in it, and so it goes on smoother. These are typically more expensive. This is $10, $11, or last time I bought it, it was $11. So these are more expensive than if you went to Lowe's or someplace like that and got a Rust-Oleum. Rust-Oleum is totally fine for these things. You're still looking at the same thing. Are you trying to fill in the layer lines in here? Then get one of the high build primers. They usually say the words, they either say high build or sandable. Usually those are the thicker primers, those 2 kinds. And it's just different naming conventions for what they want to, promote. And they cost about the same. They're just bigger cans, right? So you get more of the stuff. And Rust-Oleum is usually a good band. Duplicolor and Rust-Oleum are usually the brands that I get of that if I'm trying to get a high build primer. There are some that are plastic adhesion promoters that they're clear, so you don't really gain any surface prep type stuff, but they will promote adhesion of paints onto plastics. So I sometimes use those, but I kind of quit using them because it seemed like just the primer itself was fine without the adhesion promoter. I think the adhesion promoter for plastic is if you have a super smooth surface, that like a lawn chair or something that's got a very smooth injection molding type surface, then it might be useful. But for FDM's prints, they have texture to them, and I've been fine with just the primer. Let's see. after the primer, now you're ready for paints. There's a variety of ways you can go here. So now this is a resin print, so it's not an FDM print, but something like this guy. So smaller details. What I did with this guy is I painted him. He's smaller, so I gave him the primer that to me is thinner. It's not meant for building up layers so that you don't see things like the small scratches or the layer lines of an FDM print, because this was a resin print. So I printed it with sprayed it with this. Well, I cleaned it up. I did all the regular resin stuff. Sprayed it with the white primer, and then I painted it with the types of paint that are. Did I not bring any of them? I thought surely I would have. Surely. Here's some. Well, alright, so this is a special kind, but this kind of paint. So, these kinds. Now, these particular ones are a speed paint, which is a really thin paint. That they're not the ones I used on this guy, but I'm just the shape of the bottle, I guess, is what I'm talking about here. These are miniature paints, and so these you usually find, you can get them, obviously you can get anything off of Amazon. These you find in like war game stores, stuff like that, where they've got Army Painter or GW or those kinds of paints. These typically cost more. Now again, these are speed paints, so they're a little bit different, but in general, these kind of paints, as opposed to this kind, you know, the kind you get from Hobby Lobby and places like that, these have a really high pigment concentration in them. And so, again, imagine these are not speed paints. But so they cover pretty easily, maybe 2 coats or 1, depending on what you're doing. So I used that kind of paint on something like this size, this little guy. Now you'll notice that, where'd he go? I'm zoomed way in. I just moved him a tiny bit. There he is. Let's get him. So you'll notice he looks a little bit grungy and all that. I didn't paint that in there. A thing that you can do if you're trying to achieve this kind of finish is you can apply some sort of wash, which is a really thin, that's kind of similar to these paints. I guess I didn't bring one over here, but it's a really thin down paint of sorts, and it's called a wash. And you basically just paint the whole model with this tinted, really thin wash. In this case, I probably used a black, it looks like, maybe a dark brown, and painted over the whole thing. And the wash is very thin, and so it runs into all the crevices and kind of leaves the raised spots without much on it, and it brings the pigment with it to all the crevices, and you end up with all the little nooks and crannies having the darker color, whatever color the wash is. And so that's kind of how you get this kind of effect. The downside is these are generally kind of expensive compared to this kind of paint. This one was 79 cents. 79 cents. Although it was on sale, regular it was $4. So now this is a different one. This is there are also paints that have texture. So this is a textured paint. You'll also see the word acrylic somewhere in here. Somewhere. I assume it says that. Maybe not. Oh yeah, acrylic paint. So the acrylic part, and these are also acrylic. Most of your paints that are going to be in this realm are acrylic. Not all of them are, though. So there are different solvents that the pigment is actually suspended in, and acrylic means that usually you can clean this up with water. But there are lacquers and enamels and other kinds like this guy. You know, you might have seen these. These, if you have model kits, car models, plane models, you might have a bunch of these. Some of these are enamels, and so that means they have a different a solvent in them. And so they're fine. These are fine for FDA. It's not like they're going to melt your plastic or anything. They're generally thicker and they dry a little bit slower. So these can actually be kind of handy because they take to surfaces better in general than some of the acrylic. The acrylic stuff being thinner. If you did not primer this, you just painted straight on the plastic, the layer lines will have like this capillary effect, and you put your paint here and it spreads all the way across your model through capillary action, you know, kind of working its way through the layers. And where this stuff isn't quite as bad as that. It just takes longer to dry. Not all of the little glass bottles are enamel. It actually, you know, this one says enamel. There are some of those that are also acrylic. Let's see. You can use this kind of thing. Getting too many things up here. So here's, oh wow, gotta zoom out. Here is a acrylic marker set. And I painted this little guy with just this set of stuff, so you can kind of see it does a little bit different. This is a resin print. I probably did not prime him. I think I just, no, I did. I primed it white. Well, there's none of it left on there. So I think I primed him. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I just painted straight on the gray. I think I painted that though. So you can just use markers, and there's a variety of markers. This set is pretty comprehensive. Let me open it. And it wasn't too expensive. So these kind have two ends on them. You know, they have a, let's see, they have nibs, so more like a Mark-a-Lot or something. And one of them's a smaller one of them's a bigger one. So if you like that idea, then this is okay, and it does work. And you do have like a relatively small nib and a larger nib for each of the markers, but it's not a brush, you know. So a lot of times these would be easier to paint if you were using a brush. They make, if I can find them, let's see, is this, no, this is more the nibs. Oh, here we go. So here's a set. These are kind of harder to find, but they do make acrylic markers that have brush tips on them. So it's way more like you're holding a paintbrush and painting on whatever it is you're painting. So if you're painting this sort of thing, you know, little things, figures, high detail, whatever, then they do make acrylic markers with brush tips that I think work better for that purpose. I mean, I'm going to see if Amazon has any. Let's see. All right. I think we're back now. So we had our usual little disconnection in the stream. I'm actually really tempted. I'm looking at these 30 colors for $12. Delivered tomorrow. Limited time deal. No, normally they're only $18. So I don't know if these are any good, but they actually have decent it's hard to trust the ratings now. There's so many rating farm things out there but there's nearly 2,000. That might be a good, if you wanted to try. Like if you wanted to try, apparently Amazon, I typed in acrylic marker brush tip. Oh, you're not seeing that. There we go. Acrylic marker brush tip in the search. And these little guys, if you wanted to try that, that's probably a decent start to try. Because most of the others are going to be quite a bit more expensive, you know. $54. Now there's more, there's 120 in there. That one's not a bad set for trying. And it has both. Apparently they're dual ended, and so they're the nib on one end and the brush on the other end. I might have to try those. So we'll see. I do have you know, other kinds though. These are not. This is I don't remember how much these were. This might have been $12 for 5, 6. I don't remember how much these cost, but they're harder to find, and they are, you know, they're branded for miniature painting or whatever, so they're going to cost more. But I think if I were doing a marker base, I would want the brush tip. Let's see. What else? We're running close to the end. Do I have anything left up here? Oh, this is kind of useful. Well, all right, so spray paint. We didn't talk about spray painting that much. I don't do as much just spray painting, but I can imagine if you were doing larger things, helmets, you know, big thing, tree stumps, that you might want to spray paint them. That's generally fine. I would primer, not with these more expensive. I would go get the Rust-Oleum high build primer. You can sand the primer to get it smoother, and then pretty much any paint, any spray paint will go over the top of it. I would probably stick to the same brand, just to Rust-Oleum over Rust-Oleum, just to have better compatibility, but pretty much all the brands are going to be compatible. It's if you switch types, like if you switch from a sprayable lacquer over and a sprayable something else, then it's the different types mixing that can create problems later on, like cracking and bubbling and stuff like that. So as long as you're spraying the same types of paint or putting the same types of paint on top of one another, it's generally okay. Let's see. The other thing is this is sort of like a wash. These little Penoline accent colors. So maybe I need to paint this guy up, but he's got all these little grooves in him. There are things like this that have, oh wow, that's tight. They have a little built-in applicator brush thing. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, there it is. And they're meant for filling in these tiny little grooves right here, and it's really thin. And you'll drop it in, and it'll kind of spread through all of them. So if you're trying to do something like that, you know, you don't want to do like this guy where you just put a wash over everything and it kind of dulls everything down. You just want to highlight some little groove or whatever. They do make things like this that are called Penoline accents, and they come in different colors, usually like black and brown. But you can make your own with thin paints, but they make some already in a little bottle, and it didn't have the price on it, so I don't remember how much it was. So there's all sorts of things. Generally what I do is, well, every now and then go to Amazon and, oh wow, that's you know, not bad. Does that work? Or go to the clearance section for some of the hobby stores and see what they have on clearance, and because they might have some putty that's $1 or $2 off, or however much it was off. Let's see. Oh, one last thing. I think, let me make sure that I'm telling you the truth, that this is the last one. I have other marker brands over here. Here's another brush tip marker set. Tombow. That works okay. They're more muted colors though. So this stuff. So do I have him over here? Yes. I think I might have shown him before. So this is a tinted wax, and it's a small little thing, small little tube, but you will almost, unless you use this every day, you will not use this stuff up. It goes a super long way. And what it does is, this particular one is gold, I guess. Yeah, gold leaf. But there's a variety of these of different metal types, like gold and pewter and steel or whatever. And they're wax that has different colors in it. And generally what you do with these is you spray paint a model or whatever with a glossy paint, usually black, although you can do different colors depending on what effect you're going for. And then you take a tiny bit of this on a rag and rub it on here and buff it off. This is called rub and buff. And it does effects like this. So this is 3D printed. You can see, if you look close enough in his skull up here, you can see some lines. You can see some lines there. So it's not even printed at a super high layer or super thin layer count. He's very dusty though. And he was painted. This is, you know, some version of Skeletor. He was painted with gloss black spray paint so high build primer to try and hide some of the layer lines, because this is not one you want to try and sand. It's, you know, too many little nooks and crannies to try and sand in. So high build primer to try and hide some layer lines, gloss black spray paint, and then 2 different rub and buffs. This one probably for all the gold stuff, and then a silver one for just his face. And so you get stuff that, you know, on first, you have to look really close to see that, well, that's 3D printed. You know, if you look close enough, then you can see layer lines in a couple of spots that, you know, if you were really worried about it, you could have sanded those down. This was solely for the purpose of showing off rub and buff. So I wasn't too worried about sanding this thing down. But it's just a 3D print. It's a FDM print. It's not resin print. And it's a larger layer line too. So it's not like a 0.1 or something. This is probably a 0.3 millimeter layer line. And so you get a pretty cool metal effect with this rub and buff stuff. So a little bit harder to find sometimes. I think I probably ordered it from Amazon. No, I ordered it from Hobby Lobby. I don't know if they don't have it at Amazon. Let me see. I don't want to. Let me open. I want to keep those markers. Maybe I will get some. It's rub in buff, not end. They do have it at Amazon, so I might have ordered it from Amazon. Although none of these say I ordered them. But there's a variety of colors. Here it looks like the whole set right here. Now this is a bunch of them for $40. One of them for $14. I think you can get, you know, at Hobby Lobby cheaper, because you can go get a single one, and it's not quite. I don't think it's quite this much at Hobby Lobby. But like I say, even these small tubes, you almost will never go through the whole tube unless you're just using this stuff every day. So that's another, if you're trying to get a metal effect. Oh, I lied. There is one more. I just remembered it. I don't know where I put it either. But if you're trying to get a metal effect, this is one way to get a metal effect. If you're trying to get a chrome effect, man, there's a couple of things I forgot to show you. We have just enough time to do it. These are the best that I've found for chrome. You know, you've got the spray chrome thing that you get with the shiny silver cap, but these pins, the Molotov pins, I don't see the name brand on here. There's their logo. Oh, it's in there. I don't know if you can read it, but that's a not a W. Liquid chrome, and they come in different sizes. This is one of the smaller sizes. This is the best stuff I've seen for generating an actual chrome looking surface, and it's a pin. I think you can get just the refills that are the paint, and you can paint them on, but this is a pin, you know, little pin like those others I showed you, except that it is chrome. There are 2 other tools that I didn't show you. These would be on the front end. So you need to drill into your parts to whatever reason. Maybe you need a hole. Maybe you need to connect them together with pins or whatever. These little pin vise drills are going to be way better than an electric drill. There is a very particular electric drill that is from Tamiya that is very slow, that doesn't melt plastic, but in general it's hard to find again, and you can just use a pin vise, which is going to hold these little tiny drill bits, and that's what you need for drilling. And then I also have this this is a burr remover. I can't think of the it's for removing burrs from like a CNC machined part, but it works really well for removing brims. Like if you're using a brim on the print and you've got a brim stuck around here, this works really well to get that brim trimmed off, or any kind of little thing you need to trim off of a 3D print. This burr removal tool What is it called? Burr remover is not the name. Uh, Deburring tool. These. Okay. Yes. There we go. There's a $5 one, and it comes with a variety of different things. They actually make one of these that specifically says it's for 3D printing, and it's like $15. They're all the same. The difference is these little tips. They do have different materials and different cut angles on them if you're trying to do brass versus aluminum versus steel, but you're just using plastic, so any of them are going to work pretty much fine. I would not worry with trying to find the one that specifically says it's for 3D printing, because it's going to cost more unnecessarily, in my opinion. Well, all right. So there's one for 3D printing. It's only $7, so that's not that much more. And it looks like it comes with a lot of replacement tips. Although I've never replaced one of these tips. I guess you could. So that is for real all. Hopefully those give you some ideas on finishing a variety of different ways, things you might think of, things to avoid. Some of the glues that really aren't going to work that well. Some alternates to some of the things you might want to try that are kind of chemically or hazardous. There's some other ways to do that kind of stuff. So hopefully there was something in there that was useful. We'll be back. We should be back Friday, and maybe I will have the annealing done by then. I don't know. Either Friday or Monday is annealing. Wednesday next week is our catapult contest. There won't be a stream. So I will see y'all Friday.